Star Trek Discovery was an abomination, and I won't be concealing my disdain for it here. A show that got everything wrong it is possible to get wrong about basic entertainment, and that doesn't begin to cover the high standards it takes to make Star Trek. Don't believe me? You will. Because what is laughable is that it took its cues from one of the franchise high points, and the results underscore how incapable of understanding Star Trek the creators were. So here are the 10 ways in which the dumbest on-screen endeavour to ever bear the name Star Trek tried to be one of the smartest, and how it failed. 1. Dark and gritty. DS9 was dark, visually and thematically, a risky departure from the norm for Trek at the time. So Disco thinks, we'll just copy that. There's drama in the shadows, no Roddenberry or Berman to hold us back anymore, so we can go even further than DS9 did. Wrong, a complete misunderstanding of Star Trek. Every Star Trek show explores a new frontier, a place where the Federation bump up against the unknown. This was a different sort, a known part of space, but one where they had been outsiders until this point. The Federation were there for guidance, they were the light in the darkness. What was Discovery's frontier exactly? Even the aesthetic darkness of DS9 is because it's a former Cardassian station built for slavery. Disco turning down the lights to look edgy just makes the Federation ships look as depressing as any Cardassian or Klingon ship we ever see. And thematically, yes, wading into the moral grey was DS9's thing, but 1, Rick Berman still had the writers on a tight leash, and 2, they bent, stretched, and only on rare occasions broke the rules, where they had earned it. We were led slowly to that edge. You felt how wrong it was. Discovery is a spoiled brat. It wants all the rewards with none of the work. They jump straight into the darkness, sure they'll only pull out gems like DS9 did, but what's mostly lurking in there is cheap drama. You need smarter writers to pull off what DS9 did. Dum, 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 dum. Star Trek was a very careful creation in every era until 2009. 2. War.
What it is a good for? Absolutely nothing.
There's drama in war. Some of DS9's best episodes that pushed the Federation morality to breaking point was from the Dominion War. Episodes like In the Pale Moonlight and Inquisition are 2 of Star Trek's finest. They broke the mould. So Disco thinks, let's start a war! There was a war with the Klingons at some point in the past, let's do it! Wrong. War in DS9 was a slow burn. There was build-up. The Dominion are first mentioned in the early part of Season 2, not first seen until the end of that season and the start of Season 3, and they don't go to war until the Season 5 finale. The Dominion grew into an imposing threat, prompting fear with their military strength and paranoia over their ability to infiltrate as shapeshifters. Now, in fairness, Disco is a modern series that has half the episode count as well as its IQ, but they just launched straight into war in episode 1. Star Trek is not a war story. DS9 earned the right to go there. Disco was the guy who learned his first scale on the guitar, peeked over at a master doing a 10-minute solo, and said, I can do that. 3. Section 31. Jesus, where do I start with this? DS9 introduces Section 31 in the Season 6 episode Inquisition, where a sleep-deprived Julian Bashir is unwittingly put through a loyalty test to the Federation by the mysterious Sloan. He claims to be part of a covert agency that goes back as far as the Starfleet Charter, serving the Federation's interests in desperate times but unbound by their code of conduct. And he's recruiting. Well, that was cool, right? And it's wartime, so we can break out the Black Ops and go rogue. The rules don't apply to us. Wrong. Disco misses everything intriguing and non-canon violating about Section 31. In DS9, the Federation crew are appalled by the suggestion of Section 31's existence. Bashir only goes along with it because Sisko orders him to learn more so they can expose them. It was used sparingly. Sloan is only in 3 episodes. And even after Sloan dies, it's still not clear if Section 31 is a real thing, or the work of a few, or even just one man. The only Section 31 personnel we ever meet is Sloan, and there are no records. It's kept deliberately shady because of how serious such a thing is to the ethics of the Federation. It's plausible they could exist to do the dirty work, but not certain. the ambiguity is the only card the show could play to be consistent with Federation ethics and Star Trek canon. And as an aside, that's part of the reason Section 31 didn't work in Star Trek Enterprise either. Enterprise confirmed the existence of Section 31, which immediately made it less interesting. You could argue it's part of the Starfleet Charter, and Starfleet predates the Federation, so it's allowed, but it still misses the other major point that made it so compelling in Deep Space Nine. Section 31 works in DS9 because of Bashir. He's the Doctor who plays spy in the holodeck. He's fascinated by Garak's life of espionage. He's flirted with these ideas from the start, and now he's thrown into the real thing, confronted by the life and death reality of a romantic fantasy. It's contrast. But in Enterprise, it's Reed who's connected to Section 31, the security guy, the soldier, which is completely plausible and in keeping with his character, but there's no contrast, which makes it
dull, plodding, pedantic.
And because the Federation doesn't exist yet, there's not even a prime directive at that point, there's no illustrious history of moral victories to grate up against either. And Discovery, for fuck's sake, just put Section 31 out there in the open, like it was just another police agency. It is maddening to see something so interesting and brilliantly executed in DS9 be reduced to a fucking black uniform, a one-dimensional psychopath, and a circle of fucking morons trying to play Marvel quips. In the episode Inter Arma Enim Silent Legis, Bashir joins Sloane's plot to assassinate a high-ranking Romulan named Koval, but Bashir turns on Sloane, only to realise he anticipated all of it. In fact, betrayal was baked into the plan from the start. The real goal was Koval's promotion. Sloane was smart, so much so he outwitted a genetically enhanced doctor. Pulling strings like that means truly knowing how your characters think, how they bend, break and rationalise under pressure. That is intelligent writing. What did Disco have? 4. Mirror Universe. DS9 was the first of the spin-off shows to revisit the Mirror Universe set up in the original series. It had some fun episodes that became a welcome recurring theme in the show, and the cast were clearly having a blast leaning into their opposite selves. Discovery, of course, had to follow suit. And in fairness to them, they came up with a half-decent take, that Captain Lorca from Season 1 was originally from the Mirror Universe. And of course they had to retcon some bullshit about light sensitivity to make it work, but as far as the sins of Discovery go, that wasn't the worst. No, the worst was coming next. 5. Morally dubious allies. DS9's location at the intersection of galactic commerce meant that all sorts of people were there and passing through, giving the opportunity to introduce morally grey characters in the main cast and beyond. There was Quark, the criminal bartender, and Garak, the Cardassian spy. Well, those guys brought some extra thrills, so we'll just copy-paste that idea too. And since we're already going to the Mirror Universe, we'll bring back one of those psychos. Fuck it, we'll make it the Empress herself. Let's go big. Big is always better. Wrong. Jesus. DS9 characters were discreet. They might have been motivated by greed or power or perverse sense of order, capable of terrible things, but they operated on principles, within boundaries, playing a delicate dance between the light and the shadow. They were complicated and played with restraint. They didn't just vomit psychotic babble and kill people like Georgiou. Discovery showed zero understanding of the nuance of dark characters. There was no care. Being the opposite of the Federation doesn't make you automatically interesting. 6. Extended stories. DS9 was a trailblazer for Star Trek in this way as well. Star Trek was traditionally restricted to bottle episodes, one and done, occasional two-parters and some recurring characters, but otherwise everyone was meant to reset at the end of the episode. Characters were already at their peak. That's what it meant to be serving on the flagship in Starfleet. Personal growth wasn't the priority. DS9 chose to evolve characters. Now they had proper arcs, seen as a natural evolution for their stationary setting. And Discovery says, we'll have ourselves some of that. Now in fairness, Discovery is from the modern era where season-long stories are commonplace. all still taking their cues from mystery box storytelling from once compelling shows like Lost, now lazily applied to every show, degraded to the point there's barely any mystery. Usually it's just a show withholding information from the audience, which is not the same thing. But it also cuts both ways. If you don't like the premise, then you might not bother with the rest of it. But if the premise is intriguing enough, you might push through a lot of filler and slop just to find out what happens. And Disco certainly served up a lot of the latter and counted on brand loyalty to get them through. Discovery had poor individual episodes and ridiculous season-long plots that weren't even sci-fi. Yes, Discovery is not science fiction, and that will be covered next. Plus, the story and characters didn't so much evolve as lurch around in response to criticism. Season 1 doesn't feel like Star Trek? Fine, we'll give you Spock, Pike and the Enterprise. Don't like prequels? Fine, we'll fuck off into the future and make it a sequel. Characters are too serious? Fine, we'll make them emotionally incontinent. Fuck me, what a mess. 7. Instantly travelling large distances. Wormholes are based on real science. They could, in theory, shorten the gap between two distant points in space. They are true solutions to general relativity, just as black holes and gravitational waves are, though unlike the last two, they've not yet been found in nature. If they exist, they are believed to be unstable, which is how they were portrayed in Star Trek before Deep Space Nine. That a wormhole would be kept stable by an alien race existing outside of linear time is a cool concept and used to very good effect in many stories. So Disco says, travelling great distances almost instantaneously? That sounds cool, let's do that. In fact, fuck it, let's travel anywhere at any time we want. We'll just rip off some guy's game about magical tardigrades and inject our engineer in the arms so we can surf this subspace mushroom network. Do you get it? Do you get how ludicrous this is? How unconstrained? This is the difference between science fiction and fantasy. There are rules to sci-fi. Rules create badly needed constraints for your world, so characters can't just wave wands and fix everything. It gives them challenges. They have to confront limitations. This is a basic tenet of good storytelling. And in fact, it's one of Gene Roddenberry's fundamental rules of Star Trek that the science fiction be grounded somewhere in real science. Spore Drive is not just ridiculous, it makes space small. Again, another violation of Roddenberry's rules that space is big, which it really is. Not to mention that it's technology far in advance of anything that exists 100 years later in canon when DS9 takes place. Another avoidable clangor we'll deal with in the next point. 8. Holographic Communications. This is a simple one, but fuck me if it didn't blow straight past annoying, didn't stop for incredulity, and went headfirst over the cliff into pure retardation. There is a classic prequel problem, where our real tech now looks better than the future tech from older shows, so writers end up inventing tools that look advanced, but are still somehow worse than what comes later. Enterprise managed this pretty well by focusing on things like grapplers rather than tractor beams. They didn't have photon torpedoes yet, and transporters were new so they were used less. But holographic communications is not that. It doesn't exist now, it's not shown to exist in the original series era, it only appears in Deep Space Nine. But Disco doesn't need to bother with details like that. Holographic communications it is. It was specifically mentioned to be brand new technology in Deep Space Nine, 100 years into the future of Discovery. There's no excuse for that. That is a completely avoidable, stupid mistake. It's not like it adds anything special to the show. Every other version of Star Trek never had it except for the late seasons of Deep Space Nine. And just like every other solution they have to mistakes like this, they leave it to a single throwaway line at the start of Strange New Worlds that they're just doing away with it now. My God! But it really was a clear early indication of which Star Trek the writers had seen and how closely they'd paid attention. 9. Commander becomes Captain. This is a basic one. This was pitched as something new for Discovery, that we would follow the first officer as the lead character. But it's following the same move as Deep Space Nine, again. Sisko starts out as Commander, ends up as Captain. In fairness, despite Sisko not holding the captain's rank for 3 seasons, he still is the commanding officer. Burnham isn't. Burnham's journey as a subordinate doesn't add anything. Disgraced officer turned good is Ro Laren's arc from TNG. Again, like Sisko, she puts Burnham in the shade with her fire and competence. It's really just messy. Because Discovery was less of an ensemble show than classic Trek, it leaves the story always relying on the first officer to save the day for the first few seasons. And the writing was crap anyway, but they didn't do themselves any favours jamming the main character in the middle of the command structure like that. 10. Homage to the original series. DS9 was on the air in 1996, which marked the 30th anniversary of Star Trek. Both them and Voyager made special episodes as tribute to their roots. Trials and Tribulations was a perfect entwinement of old and new, and it still holds up today. It was a heartfelt love letter to the original series, brimming with reverie, fun, and heart. So Disco will just do that too. In fact, let's go even further back. We'll get the Enterprise with Pike as captain. Then we'll take Spock to Talos 4, the setting for the unaired pilot The Cage. And to be fair, this was actually a nice touch. It still wasn't really Star Trek. I mean, the episode isn't about anything. It was just more spinning its wheels to draw out Spock's entry into the show. It was more to do with a trend that New Trek has set, leaning into nostalgia, which is what Star Trek has mostly been about since 2009. Digging up fossils to reel in the fans for a bait and switch. Member Spock? Member Khan? Member Sarek? Member Picard, Seven and Hugh? Member Pike? Member Spock again? Member Janeway? Member the EMH? Member everybody? You only lean this hard on crutches when you can't stand on your own. Anyway, that's it. The 10 Ways Disco wanted to be DS9. It was a nightmare of a show. I could barely get through it, even for review purposes. And you know what's even more frustrating? There is 2 episodes in there that would have made perfectly good Star Trek of the past. So they can do it, but they either treat Star Trek's proper identity as optional, or more likely they don't have a clue and it just happened by accident.
And this, we do not forgive or forget.
Confusiasm, out.